Most people agree that Cape Town is one of the most beautiful cities on the planet. With a backdrop of Table Mountain, the peninsula winds its way up and down the coastline. Magnificent scenery, beautiful homes, and many would agree the friendliest people and certainly the best hospitality on earth. Cape Town is a vibrant city, a city of many faces and many places. Once, when the Dutch first arrived here to open a refreshment station to feed their ships on the route to the Indies, this was wilderness, occupied by all the well-known creatures of Africa. Elephants, rhinos, lions, even cheetah and buffalo wandered freely across the landscape. Today, the big five are long gone, hunted and driven out. The wildlife that is left is confined to fenced-off game reserves and private farms. Now, wilderness occurs in patches, separated by concrete, electric fences, highways, roads, and suburbs. All that is left is land which is unsuitable for humans to convert. Too steep, too rocky, zoned for other purposes. But even this land is constantly under threat and encroached upon. In centuries gone by, this was the ancestral home of one species, who lorded it all the way from the mountaintops to the beaches. Chacma baboons. Somehow they clung on as humanity exploded. They used their superior intellect to evade humans, avoid bullets, and survive. Their lives were idyllic for a long time. Every morning they clambered down from their mountain sleeping places into the flatland below. These were lowland and beach foraging baboons, whose daily hunt for food included scouting the shoreline for shellfish, washed up eatables, and whatever seeds and berries grew on the shoreline.
The research has shown that the baboons want to be on the coastal plain, which is exactly where the rest of us have also chosen to build our houses. There's a certain reason why the vegetation grows the way it does on the dunes, and those little berry producing plants and so on. So the baboons have already historically been going down to the coastal plain all the time, from the highlands to the lowlands. And I think the vegetation, the higher up you go up the mountain, is quite impoverished. I mean, we all know that Fynbos, you couldn't graze a goat on Fynbos if your life depended on it.
But time and people marched on. Humans took away their feeding grounds and separated the troops from each other and cut them into isolated little pockets with the hope that somehow the baboons would simply adapt to living on whatever they might find in an artificial forest or on the mountain peaks. Every year, the humans moved on to more and more baboon foraging land, encroached all the way up the mountains and even cut off the routes to the beaches. The baboons could not live on stones and the last vestiges of Fynbos, so they turned themselves into raiders of the worst kind because they're extremely intelligent. They worked out that all the food is where the humans are, sometimes in the house, through the open window, or by removing the sliding doors, on the seat in motor cars, in a myriad of shopping bags of many colors, and of course, in the rubbish bins. So now, the baboons, with limited means to find their own food, change tactics and spend their days outsmarting humans. Some humans were vastly impressed with the ingenuity of baboons, and they became great supporters of baboon rights and great protectors of baboons. They respect the baboon's right to live in their ancestral home, and they tried very hard to change human attitudes towards their primate relatives. They recognize that baboons play a vital role in the distribution of the fynbos and the environment in general. They feel the baboons are as much a part of the landscape as they themselves are, and are a great tourist attraction and part of living in Africa amongst wild animals.
I don't mind if they come onto my property. I don't see it as my property. I see this whole area as their habitat down to the ocean, which is where they forage. And I mean, anyone with a bit of common sense can see that it's us that's, expanding at a rate of knots. Like David Attenborough says, we're overrunning the planet.
And I really enjoy it because I feel like they were here first, and I would love to cohabitate with them. And by getting rid of them, we're getting rid of nature. And it's really beautiful to see how they interact as well with humans. I've never heard of a dog being injured by them or any humans. All we do is we just close the doors, wait for them to finish eating the berries. They kind of have a little bit of a run around and then they go. And I love it. I think it brings a bit of drama to the day and a bit of fun. And all they're doing is finding some food and then they're going home anyway.
Others want to see every last baboon dead or uplifted and translocated 1,000 or so miles away from their homes, their fruit and their refrigerators.
The behavior has subsequently changed immensely. Now they come into Komaki, they disperse, they're smart. In fact, they act like gangsters actually, which is why a huge number of Komaki residents will not like them.
I stayed in Glenkenny in the mountain and in Simonstown in the mountain, and I had baboons coming through my property. I had to adapt because I want to live in nature. And it's just going to get worse. The more we take away their natural habitat, the more they're going to move into the urban area.
How about you guys also take a certain amount of responsibility to protect your infrastructure? If the baboons swing off your TV antenna and it breaks, put it inside the roof or put it on a stronger pole.
Now, the city spends a lot of money on organizations and people charged with the responsibility of keeping the troops out of the houses of the people. A whole workforce of black-clad men armed with paintball guns, sirens and big sticks to whack the baboons as they do what they must, which is seek out food on the land they rightfully own but can no longer access without ingenuity. For anyone witnessing how the program is carried out, it is worrisome and certainly not sustainable. Violent means all day against animals cannot be the solution to enabling baboons to live amongst humans.
As far as I know, the brief there was to keep the baboons out of Komaki. And in that regard, I think they were fairly successful, So on paper, yes, they had a high success rate. How did they achieve it? Paintball guns. I think the methods that they used, and I've watched it close hand, have not been humane at all. They've been herded down into the village when they should have been kept away from the village. I've seen juveniles shot at close range with paintball guns. No, I think it's appalling.
But I will say that it does seem to me that the baboon monitors aren't doing any good at all. From my perspective, which is very limited, just from where I live, and I would hope that they could find another solution to keep the baboons in their natural habitat.
Some think the biggest problem baboons face in developing alongside humans is the daily struggle for food, and that the baboons must learn to respect human property and obey human laws. It is not. Some people think that baboon troops are human families dressed in animal suits. They are not. Many people think that the baboons are happily living in their surroundings, satisfied with being confined to the mountain slopes by people with weapons. Not true at all.
So for them it's easier if the baboons does get on the farm because it's much more open. You can see them much easier, you can push them much easier, but it's a bad thing for us because then we are losing and we can't afford losing production that's growing on the vineyards, and so that is more or less what's going on. We don't want them to come onto the farm. They want them to come onto the farm so they can push them much easier. So that's more or less the agreement that we must come to. And the sad thing is the baboons they are under much more pressure because now they don't know which way to go. There's people pushing them from that side, there's people pushing them from this side, and it's just an up and down story for them. Okay, like I said, in the mountain there's no water for them. because of the weather that we have been receiving for like the past few weeks. I know it's hot, the water dries up, so where there's water, they're going to go there, because like us humans, they need water too. Yes, the water is on our farm, so they're gonna find a way to get onto the farm, and we as the rangers, as managing them on the farm, we know that. So what they need, they're gonna make sure they get it. So like with water, from a water's point of view, we can't do anything about it. They need the water, they're going to come onto the farm, so there's nothing more that we can do.
All species have a mechanism for preventing inbreeding, and through that, the extinction of their own species. The best known example are lions. The whole world knows the young males are chased out of the pride by the males and must take their genetics away from their mother and sisters and cousins and go and find different genetics to breed with. Their cycle goes on forever. Every farmer knows about inbreeding and the importance of not allowing related animals to breed. Animals like chimps, kept in captivity, have proper genetic records on file, so that when they're exchanged with other breeding facilities, they avoid inbreeding. How do baboons do it? They do not, as the anthropomorphicists would have us believe, recognize their own sisters, their mother and their cousins. If they didn't have a system, they would have suffered the consequences of inbreeding centuries ago, and baboons would have gone extinct before humans even emerged. Their system is very simple and highly effective. Maturing males voluntarily disperse, suddenly for no apparent reason, or sometimes because the big troop male coalition threatens them. They leave to go and look for another troop further down the road. They do not pack a case and take their sandwiches or take their GPS device with them, as the anthropomorphicists would have us think. They simply leave. Sometimes they drift further and further to the outskirts of their familial troop. Other times they make an instant decision and just go. They have a plan. They know integrating into a new troop is not going to be easy. The troops all have big males already, with very large teeth and very sharp claws. But they realize they have to be tenacious and keep focused until they are slowly but surely accepted. And one day they will father a new generation with new genetics. The same applies to all the scattered troops in the Cape Peninsula and thereabouts. The males need to disperse, but now the next troop is cut off by highways and electric fences and vicious dogs and people who want the baboon shot if it wanders through their yard on their way to look for a new troop. This documentary is called Kataza. Kataza is an adult male baboon of dispersal age. And now we're going to tell his story. The city of Cape Town employs armed forces to manage the baboons and do their best to keep the people and the animals apart. Like everyone else, they have access to university professors who specialize in animal behavior. They have access to 100 books that explain how baboon society operates and what needs to happen for them to continue to survive. The primatologists know that baboons must disperse. They know that the peninsular baboons cannot do this. And many say that peninsular baboons are already genetically weak, and with only 500 or so making up the entire population, it's easy to understand why. So, when Kataza, who lives with the Slangkop troop in and around the enclave of Kommetjie, showed all the signs of wanting to disperse, or even form his own troop based on members of the Slangkop troop, they decided to give Kataza a helping hand. They darted him, put him into a vehicle and drove him at high speed to another isolated troop living in the suburb of Tokai. Very sensible, assuring the ongoing existence of the Tokai troop by introducing new male blood and removing the danger of Kataza taking over the Slangkop troop, breeding with his mother, sister and aunts, and causing the genetic destruction of that troop. Very sensible. In their view, two troops saved for the foreseeable future at least. But then, disaster struck, in the form of an organized group of members of the public who did not understand the bigger picture and who used emotion as their primary weapon.
Here we are at the protest standing for Kataza and the baboons of our Cape Peninsula. All these people here asking to end the cruelty of baboons.
The onslaught was relentless, and every string of human emotion was pulled by people who relied entirely on anthropomorphism to build their case, to vilify scientists and professionals in the field. Social media caught a light as a few individuals spread nonsensical stories about Kataza the baboon. He's missing his family, they said. He misses home, they told us. He wants to be back with his mother. He needs to see the kids again. His troop misses him and wants him back. He misses his leaders and wants to come home. All of it utter nonsense if one even reads the basics of baboon dispersal behavior. But people don't read science or biology anymore. They read Facebook and Twitter. So more and more joined up. They started marching about the streets, hanging up posters. They hung yellow ribbons on trees, and the people of Cape Town fell into line and went along for the ride. Everything Kataza did was anthropomorphized. If he came to a main road, they said he was looking for the way home. If he climbed a tree, they said he was looking to see what direction to go in. If he scratched a flea bite, they said it was a sure sign of anxiety. If he raided a bin, they said it was because he was looking for sandwiches to give to the family when he arrived home. They even had a roster of people to walk everywhere Kataza walked, and they kept up the barrage of vitriol to force the authorities to bring Kataza back to Kommetjie and Slankhop.
Look, yes, when the call for Kataza to be brought back was, taken to court and all the rest, there were a lot of people from Kommetjie walking with him, following him, watching him, actually watching to make sure that, secretive NCC and secretive Cape Town were not going to again do something under, the cover of darkness or whatever.
Meanwhile, the right thing had been done. Kataza had been moved, and baboon culture had been followed through, albeit by human intervention. Any dispersing male baboon would tell you, if he could, that dispersing into a new troop is not a walk in the park. You do not arrive to a welcome fanfare and a small cocktail party. You have to slowly make your way in and gain acceptance over a period of time, especially with the troop's big males. And that is what Kataza did. He began on the outskirts, sometimes well out of sight. From time to time, he even got up close and personal with the odd female. But the pressure continued. And worst of all, the authorities and baboon behavior experts got overwhelmed. There were threats against them, and they found no willing ear to listen to reality. They had left education too late. So they retreated and kept quiet. But the Bring Kataza Home movement did no such thing. They had built up a head of steam and were having a field day. They threatened the local government with withholding votes if Kataza is not brought home. And amazing as it seems, hired an attorney to take the matter to court.
Again, I call upon the DA, the City of Cape Town, Human Wildlife Solutions and Marion Nivert to please do the right thing and return him back to Slankhop troop. All these people you're seeing here in this video, they all feel the same. They all want him to be returned to Slankhop troop. What more do you want us to do?
The conservation people were too intimidated. They didn't even put up a fight. And an order was passed to bring Kataza home to the Slankhop troop, dart him again and bring him back. So that is what they did. They tracked him down, shot him with a dart, loaded him in a truck and dropped him off near the Slankhop troop. A huge victory for the fine people who joined the campaign, and equally so for the thousands of followers who never bothered to read anything on baboon behavior before hanging up the ribbons.
The public concerns me because the public have two distinct views. They've got this aggressive view that's not right, and they've got this loving view. And it's always conflict. On social media, conflict constantly. And you never know what the reality is and don't know the truth. You don't actually know what's happening. It's scary stuff.
In Kataza's case, the public response really surprised me, I will be honest, because it just took off.
We are very quick to anthropomorphize primates. This is where the problem comes in. This is what compounds management tremendously. A primate is the easiest thing to anthropomorphize. So the managers sit with their hands in the air. When people say bring Qatar home, Qatar didn't have a home. He had chosen to leave his original point of origin, which is what made him a transient male. This is what happens with baboons. There are certain sacrifices that we have to make when we live amongst wild animals, and there's certain understandings that we have to take as well. And animals become transient when you're in a patriarchal species like that. There's no space for all the males. And if there is space for all the males, they're going to cause inbreeding depression amongst themselves.
A victory? Definitely not a victory. A severe loss. Kataza was back in his family troop. So now, one of two things were going to happen. Neither of them good, and both of them entirely the fault of those who think baboons are just people dressed in animal skins. The first option is that Kataza would indeed rise to lead the Slangkop troop. If that happened, then the Slangkop troop will be extinct in 20 years. This will be because instead of dispersing, Kataza now breeds with his mother, his sisters and his cousins. Inbreeding takes hold and no babies will survive.
However, the city of Cape Town is of the view that he was a dispersing male, and they wanted to spread his genes, and that's why they relocated him to Turkey. There's no scientific paper or document that I'm aware of that refers specifically to inbreeding between baboons. Baboons disperse as soon as they reach a certain age, and that's natural for them to disperse. Well, what should happen is that our authorities need to get specialized primatologists to study these animals in the field and should give them advice. Currently, they're receiving advice from parties sitting behind a desk at UCT.
Already, weakened genetics would prove too much for the ongoing existence of the troop, and it will die out. And many experts agree that peninsular baboons are already susceptible to disease, with weak immune systems already inbred. The second option is more immediate. The troop males at Slangkop would be threatened by the presence of Kataza, who didn't leave according to baboon tradition, and they would join forces and kill him. What actually happened is astounding. Kataza proved the experts right and the public wrong. He left Slangkop and started heading back to Turkey on his own. He never made it. He got stuck in suburbia with no way backwards or forwards. So, in a move that raises more questions than it answers, Kataza got caught again. This time moved to a rehab center, 1,800 kilometers away. And his genetics will now be wasted in a cage in the town of Zanin in Limpopo. Arguably, one of the most inexplicable short-sighted decisions of the entire Kataza debacle.
Personally, it's where's his home. Keep him in the province. To keep Qatar in the province makes absolute sense. However, you've got to allow and think genetically. You can't just... Genetics die.
We've lost a huge window of opportunity to show the public that we mean business with conserving these animals, A, and B, that we did the right thing, that our moral compass was honed. This out of sight, out of mind, that's an abduction. It's seriously, that is purely an abduction. Why do we do that with our political dissidents? You speak out against the president, we put a bag on your head, tie you up and chuck you in a popo. We gave you a chance to redeem yourself, you failed. You wake up in another province.
What about the Turkey troop now? They never got Kataza, so they never got any new male blood in. So now, inbreeding is inevitable, and they too will disappear in 20 years.
I think Baboon Matters is an amazing organization, and I do think that the work that's going into trying to conserve them and protect the baboons, we should be focusing on that a lot.
So how the dynamic had shifted whilst he was away is something that I think is very difficult for we as humans to understand, that dynamic that said when he got back, why wouldn't he want to rejoin that troop? I mean, primates are sentient beings. Baboons share 97% or 94% of our DNA, I can't remember. So they share our emotional range. So I can't answer what was the situation when Kataza got back, that he saw his troop and decided that it wasn't for him anymore, because baboons are so family oriented. The offspring and the young are a vital part for the troop. But if there were no offspring coming through, one would have to say that typically their age is anything from 15 to 20 years in the wild. So it would mean that the youngest baboon born today would probably die in 15 to 20 years' time. However, you can't really predict that, because how many would be alive, what would be happening. But it certainly wouldn't be a quick fix solution. We'd be looking at baboons at least for the next 10 years. But you can safely say that around 20% of people find it acceptable to kill baboons as part of management. The vast majority of people don't.
A lot of people in Comacue can't stand the baboons. They're very vocally anti-baboons. Most people are just, I think, in awe of the fact that we're surrounded by nature. I mean, this is a beautiful little village, and to be this close to nature is wonderful.
An absolute perk of being in Cape Town is seeing the baboons, and the baboons were ranked at one point as the 4th highest attraction.
In the beginning, they did the best thing under the circumstances. They intervened and dispersed a male baboon that could not do it by himself. The public didn't give Kataza a chance to establish himself in Tokai. So they took him back where he came from, and they helped seal the long-term fate for all the urban living baboons they claim to love, admire, and respect.
Young males that come into sexual maturity and being prevented from breeding with troop members, females, young females, and so on, being prevented to do so, will then, naturally speaking, and again, this is, as I said, remember, this is one of the inherent genetic traits of populations, is to have these youngsters to start going out, look for new mates, look for new troops. That has been happening all over time. Unfortunately, within the Cape Peninsula situation, that the space for dispersing males is unfortunately limited. So the following question, or the next question, is then: so what happens that if a troop of baboons, for example, or a group of animals cannot, as you put it, trigger these mechanisms? I think that then it's logical to assume that then a certain level of inbreeding would start to take place over time, and yes, obviously it happens over generations, and of course the unfortunate downfall of inbreeding, what is also called inbreeding depression, is that offspring and further generations, they become less fit to fit back into nature. So in other words, there's poorer genetics. The general term is homozygosity. So there's a loss of heterozygosity once again, into a direction where, for example, the loss of all that heterozygosity actually makes the population then, or the species, if it's a species that only occur in a small area, makes it highly vulnerable to extinction. So those are the things that could happen. And then obviously it takes time. It takes time for inbreeding to play its course, so to speak, and it may take quite a number of generations for that to result in a reduction or an extinction event. Generally speaking, from a conservation point of view, inbreeding depression would then likely lead over, let's say, 3 or 4 or 5 generations to less resilience, or the reduced ability to fit in with nature and to deal with extreme events. So as far as my knowledge goes, no baboons cross over from the east to the west across the Cape Flats. They would never make it. So therefore, the Cape Peninsula baboon population can be regarded as probably genetically poor, if I can put it that way. And therefore, I think and we are on record, Cape Nature, myself on record, having said many years ago that, for example, bringing in fresh material, genetic material from, let's say, from the Cape Fold Mountains or from Boland Mountains into the Cape Peninsula would probably not be a bad thing. By saying is, I do think that members of the public must also realize that we have a very specific mandate to fulfill and a role to perform. And unfortunately, that is for us, that is our reality. We cannot concentrate on other things than otherwise we would be shirking our responsibility.
The bottom line here is fairly simple and very obvious. The public thought they were helping a baboon, saving him. They didn't do that. What they did was make the long-term survival of at least 2 troops of baboons unlikely, and the future of baboons forming part of the Western Cape landscape difficult to imagine, unless everyone changes their views and the authorities begin a proper education program that may even require more darting and insemination programs to strengthen the gene pool.
But at the moment, we've been locked out of management decisions for so long. And they surely have to recognize now, because of the public pressure, that people are just very unhappy.
But I would say that the city of Cape Town has badly managed the baboon situation, not just in Kommetjie, but across the Cape Peninsula. You're sitting in this village with a lot of people willing to be part of a solution, and you don't consult with them. Come on. You know, isn't that part of the policy of the DA? So both the administration and the politicians involved, I think, have poorly managed the situation.
I think the information system to inform the public was very poor. They should have actually put and explained the importance of the baboons as a full picture, not just one individual.
There needs to be an aggressive public awareness campaign. Absolutely. Whether you dress up like, I have my academic qualifications and I drive a fancy Land Rover and carry a big gun. Every now and again, I have to put on a rhino suit and go and dance on a stage at least once a week in front of school kids, at the Chamber of Commerce, or wherever it might be. And there needs to be an aggressive education campaign that's almost Goebbels-esque, if you like.
Kataza is not a story about a single baboon at all. It is about a deeper understanding of how nature works and what humans need to do to sustain it. Humans have to learn to understand what baboons need to survive long term and not be ruled by emotion over one single specimen. A single specimen that could have added value to the troop he was moved to. The reality is, there is no space anymore for baboons to live naturally. There has to be intervention. That the authorities have not included the public in their methodology or published material to explain how baboon society works and what must be done is indeed shameful and cause for concern. Their lack of education for the public enabled the tragedy of Kataza and, in a way, their own abilities to successfully maintain baboon troops on the peninsula going forward.
To me, as a primatologist, I would say we have an obligation. If that was going to be his natural dispersal route, and you've got an isolated troop of baboons, they're fulfilling an ecological role. They're adding value to our lives and what have you. And that was probably the right thing to do, to move him. You need a genetic input there. He is a dispersing male, a transient male, and therefore, I suppose the authorities just speed it up. And I think the people of the peninsula would be much poorer if those baboons slowly started dwindling out. And it will be a terrible blight on their name. Very interesting, and it's a huge loss. I think it's a huge failure. It's a failure on behalf of both the authorities and the public that insisted upon it. Because what are they going to do when the next transient male comes along? The same thing. We are also primates. We failed.
In 20 years, left as they are, baboons will be gone. Their genetics too weak, their immune systems too compromised to keep them alive. And of course, no healthy babies born. And nobody will win. Even the beloved fynbos will be altered and in trouble because it was the baboons that dispersed the seeds and encouraged regrowth.
We need baboons or some other herbivorous, destructive feeder, disturbance feeder, stochastic disturbance, where they come in and they destroy all the proteas in their feeding regime, but that's actually part of the system. Now, if you remove those baboons, I think the people of you won't notice because it'll be green. And the people that don't know any better will just say, oh, look at the beautiful green mountain. But there will be an impact. If you push down here, it's going to pop up somewhere else.
But Kataza may still be there, in his cage, 1,800 kilometers away, far from where the trouble started.